I had 5 minutes left before my night shift when I saw her standing next to my bike, arms crossed, lips pursed, and that condescending tilt of the head that only certain people manage to perfect. "This isn't a junkyard," she said, loud enough for my neighbors to hear. "We have rules in this community." I should have walked away, but that motorcycle wasn't just a vehicle. It was my late brother's. The last thing he touched before deployment. The last thing that came back. You ever had someone try to erase part of your soul in the name of neighborhood standards? Stick around, because this story doesn't end with a lecture. It ends with sirens, shattered power trips, and the most satisfying revenge HOA Karen ever walked into herself. And hey, hit subscribe and drop a comment if you've dealt with one of them. You know the type. It started 2 weeks after I moved into Windale Hills, a place that looked like it belonged on a postcard. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, overpriced bird baths. It was the kind of place I thought my brother would have liked. Peaceful. I didn't even want to park the bike outside, but the garage was full of boxes and honestly, I wanted to ride again soon. So I parked it carefully off to the side of my driveway, chained it to a small metal stake, and covered it with a gray tarp. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't in the way. It just existed, which apparently was enough to summon Linda. I first met her the day I was planting solar lights. She walked right onto my property like it belonged to her and introduced herself as the acting president of the HOA. She said it in the same tone you'd use to say, federal investigator. Blonde bob, white blouse too stiff for July, clipboard in hand. "I noticed the motorcycle out front," she said, nodding toward the tarp. "I wanted to remind you that our community has an aesthetic standard." I looked at her, then at the tarp, then back. "It's temporary. I just moved in." She smiled, but her eyes didn't. "Temporary can turn into permanent. I'd hate to see you start off on the wrong foot here." I didn't answer, just kept planting. She lingered a second too long, then turned on her heel and marched off. 3 days later, I got the first letter. It wasn't mailed. It was hand-delivered, folded neatly and shoved under my front door. A friendly reminder about prohibited vehicles visible from the street. While motorcycles may be permitted, visible storage is discouraged as it may detract from neighborhood cohesion. It wasn't signed. I laughed it off at first. Took a picture of the letter, sent it to my buddy Dean back home. He replied, "You moved into Karenville." I didn't respond. I was starting to feel it too. That weekend, I came out to find someone had knocked over my bike cover. Not torn, not slashed, just peeled off and tossed aside like dirty laundry. Nothing stolen, nothing damaged, just exposed. I bought a motion light and stuck it to the side of the garage. Installed a cheap camera under the eave. Nothing fancy, just enough to record if someone did it again. The next morning, Linda was back, this time with a man trailing behind her, holding a clipboard. She didn't look at me, just stood at the edge of my property, pointing at the bike and muttering to the guy beside her. He nodded, wrote something down, and took a photo. I walked over. "Can I help you?" Linda turned slowly. "Just documenting ongoing compliance issues." I gestured to the bike. "It's covered, and it's parked on my driveway." She shrugged. "And I'm sure the board will take that into account." That night I checked my camera footage. There was Linda standing next to the bike while the clipboard guy snapped pictures. No measuring, no discussion, just photos. The next day, the second letter came. This one official with an HOA letterhead and a typed signature from the enforcement committee. It stated that my motorcycle violated visual cohesion standards and that I had 7 days to remove or store the vehicle out of public view. I thought about ignoring it. Then I remembered the stories. Neighbors who lost backyard swings because they weren't the right shade of wood. A guy who got fined for planting sunflowers too close to the fence. So I called the number listed at the bottom of the letter. It rang once, then voicemail. I left a message, calm, polite, but firm. No one called back. That weekend I came home late from a shift. The bike was gone, not moved, not towed by the city. Gone. The chain had been cut. The cover left crumpled on the ground like a dropped flag. And on the driveway, a note, handwritten, one sentence. "This community is not a parking lot. I stood there in silence, the note trembling in my hand. For a second, I thought maybe it was stolen. Random theft. But the cut chain was too clean. The folded tarp left too deliberately. And that handwriting? I'd seen it before. Linda. I didn't even go inside. Just turned, marched to her house 2 blocks down. Porch lights glowing like a crime scene. I knocked once. Nothing. Knocked again, harder. The door opened just enough for her face to appear, framed by the crack like she was peeking out of a bunker. "Where's my bike?" I asked, low and steady. She didn't blink. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I held up the note. "You sure?" Her eyes flicked down, then back up. "You're making a scene. I suggest you leave before I call security." "There is no security." She smirked. "That's what you think." And the door closed. I stood there for another few seconds, then walked home. My hands shook the whole way, not from fear, from fury. The next morning I filed a police report. Officer didn't look hopeful. "No serial number? No GPS tracker? No video?" "I've got a camera, just not pointed directly at the bike." He sighed. "We'll file it. But if someone towed it claiming HOA violation, that's civil, not criminal. You'll need to take it up with them." That same afternoon, a flatbed truck rolled down my street. I stepped outside. My bike was on the back, lashed down with 2 thick straps and missing a mirror. The rear fender was cracked. The gas tank dented. The guy behind the wheel climbed out, holding a clipboard. "Delivery for Mr. Parker?" I signed without a word. The driver unstrapped the bike and rolled it halfway down the ramp. One of the tires caught on the edge and tipped the bike, hard, right onto its side. Metal scraped pavement. "Jesus!" I yelled. The driver shrugged. "Sorry, not my fault. Wasn't secured properly." He hopped back in the truck and drove off. I crouched next to the bike. The side was scratched to hell. The exhaust bent. And worst of all, the frame, his frame, was cracked near the welds. I looked around. 2 neighbors across the street watched from their porch but didn't say a word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the garage with the door halfway open, staring at the damage. The bike had survived my brother's deployment, survived 10 years of use. It didn't survive Linda. So I called Dean. "You still got that lawyer friend? The one who helped you with the contractor mess?" He texted me a number. I called. That's when everything shifted. The lawyer Mallory wasn't cheap, but she was the kind of person who listened hard and spoke softly. I emailed her the letters, the footage, photos of the bike, and a scan of the note. She called me back less than a day later. "You have a case," she said, "but it won't be quick." "I don't need quick. I need right." We started with a demand letter. Formal, clean, and brutal in tone. It went straight to the HOA board, not just Linda. I hand-delivered it to the community office, and for the first time, the receptionist didn't make eye contact. That same week, I filed a small claim suit against the HOA for property damage and unlawful seizure. Mallory helped me draft every line, but Linda didn't back down. 2 days later, I found a fresh violation notice taped to my door. Failure to comply with HOA landscaping code. Weeds observed near mailbox. $150 fine. The next day, trash cans visible from curb longer than 30 minutes after collection. $75 fine. Then, garage door left open unattended for more than 10 minutes. $100 fine. They were coming for me with paper cuts, so I responded with precision. For each violation, I sent photographs showing compliance. Date stamped, time stamped, location verified. Sent by certified mail to the board with copies to Mallory. I bought a new camera system. High-definition, cloud-based night vision. Covered the entire front yard and driveway. Then I went to every neighbor on my street. I didn't beg. I didn't rant. I just asked, "Has Linda ever threatened you with fines?" Most of them said no. But a few said yes, quietly, like they were scared the walls might hear. One elderly woman whispered, "She told me my lawn gnome violated community integrity? Said she'd have my grandchildren banned from visiting if I didn't remove it?" Another guy across the cul-de-sac admitted Linda fined him for his wife's car being too faded. Patterns were forming. I gave Mallory the names. She dug deeper. Turns out the towing company Linda had used wasn't even contracted by the HOA officially. It was a company her cousin ran, unlicensed in the state. Mallory smiled when she told me. Now we're getting somewhere. That Friday, I got a call. Mallory had filed a formal grievance with the county mediator for HOA abuse. That meant a hearing was scheduled. Public, legal, on the record. I printed flyers and left them in every mailbox. HOA transparency meeting. You have a right to know. No logo, no accusations, just a time and a place. I didn't expect much. Maybe 5 people, maybe 10. 32 showed up. Linda did too. She wasn't smiling anymore. The room we used for the hearing wasn't fancy, just a fluorescent lit space at the local library with folding chairs and a podium. But it felt like a courtroom, at least to me. Linda arrived 10 minutes late, trailed by 2 members of the HOA board who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She wore a navy pantsuit and carried a thick binder, gripping it like a shield. The mediator was a man in his 60s with clear glasses and a calm stare. He introduced himself as Mr. Voss and opened by asking if all parties were present. I raised my hand. Linda raised hers a second later, lower and slower. Mr. Parker, he said, you submitted the complaint. Please begin. I didn't bring a binder. I brought a flash drive. Mallory had prepped everything. Video clips of Linda's unannounced visits, the bike being loaded onto the truck, time-stamped images of the letters and notes, and even footage from the night the cover was tossed off. I kept my voice steady as I narrated. This isn't about rules. It's about power. My motorcycle wasn't blocking traffic. It wasn't a hazard. It just offended one person's sense of control. I ended by showing the photo of the dented tank and reading the repair estimate aloud. Linda didn't look at the screen once. Mr. Voss turned to her. Ms. Halbrook, your response? Linda flipped open her binder and began reading from a typed statement. She spoke fast, stacking excuses like bricks. Community aesthetic, neighborhood integrity, public visibility, safety concerns. None of it addressed the damage. At one point, she said, the vehicle in question had no license plate and was therefore considered abandoned. I raised a printout. This is my registration. The plate was removed for restoration, temporarily, not abandoned. Mr. Voss took notes without comment. Then Mallory stepped in. We've confirmed that the towing company used was not officially contracted by the HOA. Further, no formal vote was held authorizing the removal of Mr. Parker's property. This was a unilateral decision by Ms. Halbrook. Linda's face twitched. The board trusted my judgment. Then why are they silent now? Mallory asked, turning toward the 2 board members behind her. Neither answered. The room was quiet, too quiet. Then one of the neighbors who'd come just to listen, an older man in a windbreaker, stood up and said, she fined me for having a wind chime, said it was a sound violation. Someone else added, she told me my mailbox was disruptive to the historical visual language of the street. And then more voices, one after another. Stories of threats, of violations with no warnings, of cameras turned away. Linda turned pale. By the end of the meeting, Mr. Voss looked tired. This situation is clearly beyond the scope of one dispute, he said. I will be filing a recommendation for a formal audit of HOA leadership practices. Linda stood abruptly, gathering her papers. This is slander, she hissed. No, ma'am, Mallory replied. This is accountability. That should have been the end. But Linda wasn't done. 2 days later, I received a letter taped to my door. No envelope, just tape. Notice of community enforcement escalation. Multiple ongoing violations. It listed 10 new infractions. Grass height too long, porch light too bright, oil stain from a guest's truck. Each one carried a fine. Added together, it totaled nearly $1,000. I called Mallory. She's retaliating, I said. Mallory didn't even pause. Then we escalate. She filed for a restraining order, not physical but procedural, an emergency motion to freeze all HOA enforcement actions against my property until the audit was complete, and it was granted, which meant the next letter Linda sent was a violation of a court order, and that changed everything. We took it to the police. A uniformed officer showed up at Linda's house with a copy of the order in hand. I watched from my porch as he spoke to her on the steps. She kept trying to talk over him. He kept pointing at the paper. Eventually, she went back inside and slammed the door. But the real shift came the next day. I was returning from work when a white SUV pulled up next to me. A man in khakis stepped out and introduced himself. Name's Richard Keene. I work with Channel 7. You mind if I ask you a few questions about the Windale HOA situation? Word had spread. Someone had leaked the footage. Probably one of the neighbors. That evening, I watched the segment on the local news. The headline read, "Motorcycle Seized by HOA Sparks Community Outrage." They showed the video of Linda by my bike, her voice calling it visual pollution. They showed the cracked fender, the handwritten note, the meeting footage, and then they cut to me, standing in my garage. "I'm not against rules," I said. "I'm against abuse of them." That line apparently stuck, because my phone buzzed for the next 24 hours. Messages from people in other neighborhoods, HOA horror stories, offers of support. Linda tried to push back. She posted a message on the HOA bulletin board accusing me of media manipulation and harassment of community leadership. But no one believed her anymore. Even her allies began stepping away, one by one. And then came the tipping point, a knock on my door at 7:30 a.m. I opened it to find Officer Timmons and a man in a gray suit. "Mr. Parker," the man said, handing me a folder, "I'm with the county assessor's office. We've received multiple complaints regarding the misuse of HOA authority. We'd like to ask you a few questions." I stepped aside. For the first time since moving to Windale Hills, I felt like the house really belonged to me. The county audit began quietly, but its ripples spread fast. Within days, every homeowner received a notice from the assessor's office, a formal review of HOA policies and a request for resident testimonies. For most neighborhoods, that would have caused mild irritation. In Windale Hills, it cracked open a dam. By the end of the week, 17 homeowners had submitted written complaints. Anonymous at first, then more courageous. Names, dates, even a few with receipts. Linda responded the only way she knew how, by doubling down. She hosted an emergency HOA meeting, handpicked her 2 most loyal board members, and tried to rewrite enforcement protocols. The new rules proposed penalties for residents who intentionally attract negative media attention, claiming it constituted reputational harm to the community. Yes, really. But this time, the board pushed back. Amanda Navarro, the treasurer, quiet, glasses, always scribbling in a legal pad, raised her hand. "I move to table this proposal pending legal review." Linda tried to overrule her. Amanda didn't flinch. "Robert's rules of order still apply, Linda." The room froze. Someone in the back clapped. Linda's jaw tightened. The motion passed. Later that night, I received a text from Amanda. "I've been compiling things. I think you should see them." We met at a diner off the freeway, neutral ground. She slid a flash drive across the table. Inside, HOA budgets going back 5 years. Transactions marked community enhancement that led nowhere. Thousands paid to companies with no public presence. Landscaping charges billed twice in a month. Legal consultation fees without any signed invoices. And one name kept popping up: Halbrook Realty Services, Linda's side business, not disclosed in the HOA documentation. Amanda looked tired. "She's been redirecting HOA money through shell vendors. I can't prove all of it, but there's enough to raise questions." The next morning, I called Mallory. She brought in a forensic accountant. Within 72 hours, we had a summary ready for county investigators. That's when things went from personal to dangerous. 3 nights later, my cameras caught movement in the backyard. 2 figures, hooded, fast, deliberate. One carried a canister, the other held something wrapped in cloth. They stopped near my back fence. The motion lights flicked on, and they bolted, but not before my system got clear shots. Mallory insisted we go public. It's time to take away her anonymity. This isn't a squabble anymore. It's systemic abuse. So I posted the footage online. No dramatic editing, no commentary, just raw, time-stamped video. Within 24 hours, it had 38,000 views. Local news picked it up again. Then a regional station. The headline this time: HOA scandal escalates. Vandalism alleged amid financial probe. Linda finally broke her silence. She called a press conference in front of the Windell Hills clubhouse, wore a blazer, held a typed statement, tried to play victim. Unfounded accusations, targeted harassment, fabricated documents, the usual. But halfway through, someone from the crowd shouted, "What about the fake lawn repairs from last year?" Another voice added, "Or the new signage budget that disappeared?" Linda's hands shook as she flipped pages. This is all being twisted by people who don't understand community management. Her voice cracked. 2 days later, she filed a cease and desist order against me, claiming defamation. Mallory laughed when she read it. "She's panicking. Let's file discovery," which meant Linda's emails, financial records, and internal HOA communications were now subject to legal access. She tried to withdraw the suit the same week. It was too late. Then came the board vote. Amanda had gathered enough signatures to call for a leadership referendum. For the first time in Windell Hills history, residents could vote to remove the sitting president midterm. Linda showed up that night visibly shaken. No binder, no entourage, just a thin smile and trembling hands. "I gave my life to this community," she said, voice thin. "This is how you repay me?" Someone replied, "You gave it your name, not your service." The vote wasn't close. 63-4. Linda was officially removed. But the aftermath wasn't neat. Her cousin's towing business shut down 2 weeks later after an anonymous tip led to an investigation. Turns out Linda had been referring him HOA business for years under the table. The county froze the HOA's accounts pending a full audit. Emergency management was handed over to a third-party administrator. And me, I finally got an official letter in the mail, certified, embossed, signed by the new administrator, all fines revoked, damages acknowledged, HOA liability accepted. Inside was a check. It didn't cover the full bike repairs, but it was close. I didn't cash it, I framed it, because something had shifted, not just in the neighborhood, but in me. I was the guy who didn't used to say anything, the guy who thought, "Don't make waves." Now, I'd built a movement by accident, one neighbor at a time. One camera, one broken rule. Linda sold her house less than a month later. A moving truck showed up on a rainy Tuesday. No goodbyes, no farewell emails, just silence. Amanda stopped by that evening, handed me a potted cactus. "Symbolic," she said. "Hard to kill, unapologetically sharp." We stood in my driveway watching the last box go into the truck, and I realized something. The bike wasn't the only thing Linda tried to break. She tried to break the idea that we had a right to stand on our own property and be left the hell alone. And in trying to break it, she made it stronger. A week after Linda left, the new HOA administrator held a town hall. Not in the clubhouse, but in the elementary school gym. Bigger space, brighter lighting, no podium, just folding chairs in a circle. "Let's make this a conversation, not a performance," he said. And that's exactly what it was. For the first time since I moved in, neighbors actually spoke like neighbors. No whispers, no glances over shoulders. People talked about what they wanted fixed, not enforced. More benches at the park, less over-manicured hedges, a community bulletin board without a lock. Amanda was officially elected president by the end of the meeting. Unanimously, she stepped up to the front, took a breath and said, "We forgot somewhere along the way that a neighborhood isn't about control, it's about trust. Let's rebuild that." There was no applause, just quiet agreement. I didn't say anything during the meeting, I just listened. Afterward, a guy I'd never spoken to approached me. Beard, flannel, looked like a former lumberjack. He extended a hand. "Name's Carl. I live 2 blocks down. Just wanted to say, thanks." "For what?" He smiled. "For giving the rest of us permission to speak." That night I wheeled the bike back into the driveway. Still banged up, still missing a few parts. But it stood straight again, and I fired it up. The engine coughed, rattled, then roared. Neighbors turned, some smiled, one kid clapped. I didn't take it for a ride. Not yet. I just let it purr while I stood next to it. Felt the hum of something that had been broken, now rebuilt. A week later, I got an email from a producer. Loved your story. Saw the local segment. Would you be open to talking more about HOA abuse for a national piece? I wasn't sure. I didn't do this for headlines, but I forwarded it to Mallory anyway. Her reply, I say do it. Sunlight is still the best disinfectant. 2 days after that, I found a package on my doorstep. No return address. Just a brown envelope inside with a note. I'm sorry. You were right. I lost sight of what this was ever supposed to be. L. Inside the envelope were copies of the original HOA bylaws from 20 years ago. Before the revisions, before the power grabs. Typed on yellowing paper, scanned cleanly, highlighted in ink. The last page had a handwritten postscript. A community should never need enemies, but it always needs someone brave enough to say, enough. I didn't know if the apology was real or just a last attempt to reclaim dignity. Didn't matter. I placed the envelope in a drawer next to the bike's title, a different kind of document of ownership. A few months passed. Life settled. The sun hit the street differently. People started waving more. Michael, the neighbor who had stayed quiet through the worst of it, stopped by one afternoon holding a toolbox. You fixing the bike? Trying. Need a second set of hands? We spent the next 3 hours tightening bolts, aligning parts, sanding rust. Didn't talk much. Didn't need to. When we finished, he handed me a cold beer and nodded toward the road. Go. So I went. Rode out of Windale Hills like I owned every inch of that pavement. Not because of some paper. Not because I'd won. Because I had stayed. Because I had looked at the thing meant to scare me, break me, humiliate me, and answered with facts, with law, with voice. And because I learned something powerful. Bullies don't survive in the light. They operate in silence, in rules nobody questions, in fear nobody names. The moment you shine the camera, the moment you say, not this time, they shrink. That's what Linda taught me unintentionally. That's what Windale Hills gave me. A fight I didn't choose, but one I finished. Later that year, Amanda and I organized the first real community barbecue in years. No sign-up sheets, no rules about tablecloth colors, just neighbors, folding tables, and stories. One kid rolled up with a scooter and stared at my bike. That yours? Yup. Looks cool. It is cool. He pointed at the scratch on the tank. What happened? I paused, smiled. Neighborhood history. He didn't get it. That was fine. He would one day. After everyone left, I sat on my porch watching the paper lanterns sway in the breeze. A different kind of quiet had settled over the street. Not tension, not fear. Peace. A knock at the door. It was Amanda. She held up a sign, painted by one of the neighbor's kids. It read, "No motorcycles prohibited, except this one." We both laughed. I hung it in the garage, right above the spot where the bike sleeps. And now whenever someone new moves in, I tell them the same thing. This is a good neighborhood, but it didn't start that way. Took some noise to make it quiet again. So if you're watching this and dealing with your own HOA nightmare, remember, noise isn't always bad. Sometimes it's exactly what's needed to be heard. And if you're still here, hit that like button, drop a comment with your story, and never forget, no one gets to tell you who you can be on your own property, not without a fight.